this episode, we are talking with Iván. He is the founder and master distiller for Casa Lumbre brands. I mean, talk about innovation in the agave category. They have Mezcal. They have a Mexican whiskey, a corn liqueur, and Ancho Reyes, which is a chili liqueur, all within the last 10 years. So this guy's got a great background in learning about earth and the plants and how he's kind of snowballed this into creating some really cool, unique brands. So listen to the story of a owner and master distiller and how he's innovating within this agave category. You'll enjoy this one. So we're going to get right into it. So we're live. I'm here with Iván of Casa Lumbre. So I guess before we even get to, talk about the brands, you have a lot about yourself. So I would love to hear just kind of a little bit about your background and a little bit about, how you got into the agave spirits business. And then we'll get into some other fun things.
Wonderful. So, well, first thing to the basics. So I am Mexican. I was born in Guadalajara in 1977. So I'm 44 years old right now. I was born in the town or in the capital of tequila, if you want to say that, is Guadalajara, which has always been relatively close. But it took quite some time until I ended in direct involvement in producing spirits and making agave spirits. So I was since very young, very excited and connected with nature. Since I was a teenager, I got really involved in things like conservation and things like that. Used to camp a lot. I was in love with the sea. Since very young, we were spending a lot of time in the summers in the Pacific coast of Jalisco, in Puerto Vallarta, mainly Sayulita, San Pancho. And well, I decided to study biology. So I was kind of more hippie looking kind of guy, long hair, always in this big discussion inside me if I should be an ecologist or instead I should get into the biochemistry, molecular biology side, because both were really fascinating to me. Particularly evolution was a subject that I was really fascinated with. And so when the time came, at the end of my high school years, I decided to pursue biology. I started in Mexico, in Puebla, and the exercise the time of studying biology was truly amazing. And I had the chance to travel around. I started in Puebla, but I spent time in the south of Chile, in Valdivia. I also spent doing tropical ecology in Barbados. At the time, I was jumping in the water and swimming a lot of time and having a good fun in the afternoons. And I ended really my undergraduate. My last year was at Canada in Montreal, and I had different passions through that time, but plants. Not for the reasons you would imagine. I'm not a botanist. I'm not good walking around telling you, very general like classifications I can identify, but I'm not the kind of guy who will enter into a botanical garden and tell you what is every single plant. But what I got fascinated with was how an organism that cannot move can cope with their difficulties. Plants are like Zen. They find their solutions from the inside out. They have a enormous plasticity of how they work, how they face adversity, from attacks from pests to changes in temperature. And they create their own food as well, which they make it a very interesting, metabolically speaking, organism. So at the end of my undergraduate, I decided that I was passionate about understanding the solutions that plants developed in order to be successful. And I went to do a PhD to England. At that moment, it wasn't clear what would have been my final subject, to a particular research unit that was in Sussex University, who were dealing with plant and stress. Basically, they were studying what happened when plants are in the edge, in extreme conditions, from different approaches. They were working with all sort of very, let's say, documentary commonly seen plants like carnivorous plants and resurrection plants that tolerate arid conditions for years. But being there, I wasn't so excited with these kind of models, and I truly wanted to bring something more meaningful culturally and economically. And then is when I came back to agave. My father, at some point, was very involved in the early development of the agave nectar. That was the first name of what now is called agave syrup, or the fructose you can produce by breaking down the sugars of that. As an entrepreneur, my father made a company when I was 14 years old, but I really never imagined to connect that. Called the Colliery Company, I remember. And he was really one of the first to bring agave nectar in the 90s to the US. Eventually, that company was sold, and my father came out of that business. But anyway, the thing is, I decided to want to investigate agave. And the question my PhD was about was not very related with spirits, in fact, was a much more broad, intellectual kind of question, and was like how these plants and have evolved into tolerating harsh temperatures, conditions, and in particular, the unique solutions agave has to obtain CO2 from the air and produce very peculiar sugars within them. And also, I studied compounds that have a very important protective power, like terpenes and other things. Terpenes brings flavors and smell, but I would learn that later. So I did a PhD, I ended it, and then I had to make a decision. Are you so happy with academia that you can pursue a postdoc, or would you accept a job in a tequila company? What happened basically is an enormous crisis of agave occurred kind of simultaneously. I was doing my PhD, and the tequila industry was suddenly interested in having people who could know more about the agave plant. And that is when I get a job proposition, originally for a company that doesn't exist anymore called Alidomec. And in the moment I was saying yes, Pernod Ricard took over. And they at the time, Alidomec had Sausa, then Sausa left because they had a very complex financial strategy of buying Pernod was the fifth or sixth largest company at the time, and Alidomec was the second. So they make this enormous merge, and then immediately after they start to get rid of the brands they had. So at the end, Sausa ended it somewhere else, and Pernod decided to keep me. And I stayed, instead of going to Jalisco to work with agaves, I ended in Mexico City in a lab that was one of the most advanced at the time in the world. I mean, they had the central lab, the Alidomec for Mexico was in Mexico City, and I inherited this enormous department. I was 28 years old, ending just a PhD, never had a corporate job in my life, never had people reporting to me or anything. And suddenly I got this job with 87 engineers. I used to say, no, guys, I'm biologist. You are the engineers. I'm a biologist that just happened to be here, and now I'm your boss, whatever. But it was a great opportunity to learn. I learned about quality control. I discovered what distillation was. I suddenly was there putting together my concepts of biochemistry into action in distilling. It happens that a lot of what I studied in agave plants, a lot of these molecules are relevant in the flavors of spirits. And that was amazing. And I fell in love with it. And then my life changed. So I got an education from that job. I got the opportunity also to understand how large corporations works. I understood what I liked about it and a lot of what I don't like about those large companies. So after almost 6 years, I left Pernod Ricard in a desire of making more relevant innovation. I was already in charge of new product development. I was in charge of environmental security and quality control, like everything related with those things. I was in charge of almost all technical areas in Mexico. At the time, there were 6 distilleries. I learned to distill grapes with Pernod. I was doing Kahlua at the time, so I learned about liqueurs, making wine. In my time, we developed Altos tequila with Jesus Hernandez. At the time, I was a younger boy, of course, but I was in charge of new product development. So that's what I call my second PhD. I mean, I had my first one very more
Yep.
into the plant and very intellectual, and then this 5.5 years I spent in Pernod was really a door that opened to me to understand the business, but mostly the production of spirits. Marketing was something I always was fascinated about, but I asked multiple times in Pernod if I could move into that area. They said no to me. They say, "What are you talking about? You are the lab guy. You have an entire department reporting to you, and you want to be a marketing something manager or impossible." So I had to learn about marketing and about how to present a current product and brand to the world that is standing for things that are valuable. And that I learned later on in my first project that was Montelobos with my partners, Danny Schneeweiss and Moy Gindi, who are my partners up to today. That was late 2010. I met them and we started in early 2011 with the first project that at the time Casa Lumbre was unclear. We were just working really hard to bring mezcal to the world. Danny and Moy had their own story as entrepreneurs, being very young. They developed Milagro. They were not experts in agave or in tequila, but they were really clever, sensible guys who understood what a new way of presenting tequila in the American market, and they succeed with a bottle that was modern at the time, with the idea that tequila was not about charros. So they have their own story, and I had mine, and we meet each other, and we decided to create this partnership. And Montelobos was the first project, and then the other. So that's kind of an introduction, a fast introduction of how, from being a guy from Guadalajara who studied biology, I ended becoming a Master Distiller, and now my other role is to be a Chief Innovation Officer. Now it's not only about the products I like to do, or I personally take time to conceptualize and create, but opening up to other people that works in my lab, other entrepreneurs that wants to partner with us and help them to bring to life brands that we feel are exciting.
Yeah, wow, it's a really interesting story. So kind of going back to a little bit. I mean, you were talking about your upbringing, and you spent a lot of time swimming and the land. Most kids are just playing; they're not really trying to understand it or learn about it. Where did the interest about agriculture or the land kind of come from? Were your parents really into it? What you mentioned, your dad with the agave nectar. Where do you think you got that inspiration from? Or were you just always a curious kid to learn about the land and the plants? Or do you think you got a little bit of that inspiration from your family?
I think my initial approach as a kid into getting fascinated about things were more like trying to crack the code, more intellectual, more abstract. I mean, I don't think I was a particularly wild boy in that sense. I mean, yes, the beach, that was since very little, I don't know, my parents were crazy because now I don't allow my kids to do that, but I was swimming in red flag in the Pacific Ocean, open sea. We have very clear rules that, well, if at some point you feel tired, you just let you go. And more than once, they had to send a boat to look for me in the middle of the ocean. But was not a problem. You could just run and you get into the ocean. Doesn't matter. There's 4 meters tall waves. Doesn't matter. So that was my wild part. But in terms of connecting with nature, I think my early connection was a lot about, oh, wow, so why this works like this? 1 + 1 is 2, but then is this mechanism? And my interest was broader, was not only biology. But what changed a lot of things were in my teenager's time. I participated in a program in the Sierra Nevada in California. I was 15 years old, which a lot of young people, same age from Mexico and the US, were placed together in a program made at the time by Peace Corps. And the idea was to spend a month helping in certain forests to make physical work, like to to clean like the walking paths in Plumas National Forest, and I mean we did a month of work in nature, and that really made me like put all that curiosity much more into nature. I remember we did a 10 days walk through 1,000 lakes, and which is an area, beautiful area in the Sierra Nevada. But for 10 days, we were just carrying our backpacks, eating what we were carrying. We got attacked by bears. We got all sort of adventures. But since then, I felt nature was a connection. And then the agricultural part, I think, is more coming from my quest into flavor, my fascination for food, and my let's say my consciousness that have evolved that chemicals make a difference. I mean the use, I mean, to have more sustainable ways of growing things makes a difference for the world and for the health. And that came more later on in my life. I think having the experience in Pernod Ricard was also of I mean massive in terms of the brands I was taking care of, and the enormous amounts of raw materials we were able to, for coffee, for instance, or for grapes for the brandies, and that started to open up more my ideas. Together with my degree, I mean, it started to be very clear for me that spirit will never be better than the raw material you are using in order to produce it. Mostly when you do white spirits, which is really my core. I mean, yes, I do whiskey now, and I'm discovering a lot of things about aging. But what my expertise is more into how you trap the essence of a raw material, and then agriculture becomes fundamental. Just like the winemaker, winemaker will make something extraordinary or just mediocre based of what can be achieved in the farming. And it depends on the product, but if you do vodka, this may not be exactly true. I mean, because it's such a let's say polished, unflavored compared to other things product. But when you look at liqueurs that are made with natural ingredients, well, exactly how expressive your chili is, like in case of Ancho Reyes, is super important to be looking at how and where these things are being grown. With corn, now what we are doing with it. So I started to get fascinated, but I think that fascination to agriculture in specific, what didn't come with biology, but came much later when I was distilling. Then it's like, okay, where are the flavors? Oh, I have to look at how these things are being grown.
Yeah. Do you think we meaning us as society have lost a lot of our connection with plants? I mean, I feel like we used to be really one with the earth, one with plants. And do you think, or I could be wrong, that we've just sort of lost touch? We take a pill, or we do this, we get our food from wherever, but I don't think we really realize the complexity of plants and the complexity of nature. Do you think humans have just kind of lost touch, or do you think we're still?
No, I think we have lost touch completely. I think we are also a market, or let's say a bunch of people who claim every time they want things to taste the same. And then industry has done that. I mean, this idea created in Industrial Revolution, they first were doing in a production line pieces of steel, but that same concepts were moving to the food and spirit industry, in which the promise of quality was more about consistency than about complexity, or how far you can go in bringing an expressive thing. And what has happened in my generation, maybe since the 70s, let's say 7 or 10 years younger than me up to today, and now even worse, is that most raw materials become industrialized in the way the agriculture is actually made. And now we are not so connected with our ingredients, because our ingredients are really not that flavorful. I mean, depends also in which country you live, from where you are getting your food. It's not as before. I mean, you go to a farm in Italy and they serve you certain things, and then your mind blows away. Now they make Michelin star restaurants and is extremely expensive just by doing what has been done always since the agricultural revolution arrived. But what is true is that in order to achieve consistency in food or in spirits, what you have to do most of the time is to sacrifice complexity. Because as the promise is to always stay the same, then, well, let's do something milder, let's do something more boring, but something that can taste the same every time. The other industry that was created and that has been part of we disconnecting with nature and disconnecting of where flavor comes from is the flavoring houses. Flavoring houses were created at the same time industrialization of making food and making spirit initiated. I mean, and there are not so many companies, lots French and a couple of Swiss, French, Italian, mostly are the same companies that makes the lotions and the perfumes you get in the airport. The ones that are producing flavors for all the food and beverage industry are the same companies, specialize in how can I either synthesize or concentrate flavors. And the laws, I mean, we lost most of our medieval styles of making things. With very few exceptions, France and Italy understood in the middle of the agricultural revolution and the industrialization of food and beverage that they had to protect that, and they created the denominations of origin. And there are certain things in cheese, in spirits, in things in wines that were protected. But generally speaking, most of the world, mostly the Anglo-Saxon world, moved into first making a product that is not very tasty, and then asking the flavoring houses to help them to bring the flavor back into the product. So when you look at a lot of the products, including whiskey that allows 2.5% of a blender that nobody knows what is it. I mean, if you get into the legislation that I know really well, there's a lot of big holes for companies to bring the flavor they cannot actually make anymore, either because the raw materials they are buying are so lame and industrialized that they don't taste to anything, and then they have to complement, or because they just prefer to kill it, like they prefer to do something neutral and then add the flavor just for consistency reasons. So we are coming from that era, but I would say that since 10 or 15 years ago, when the slow food movement started, now things are changing, and categories like Mezcal came to the world, an interest of knowing where the raw material is coming from, how your product or your project is connected to a particular place coming. Now there's a new space to define and create spirits and projects that connects farming with the product you're making and can truly be more complex, even if you cannot be as consistent as probably a rum that is made in millions and millions of liters from bakery or a product because the scale is different and the raw material is different. So I'm fascinated with that particular thing, and now is what my life is dedicated in a good extent, is to bring propositions of spirit that are wanting to trap those essence of farming into it, from farm to bottle, if you want to say.
Yeah, and speaking of complexity, like if the first time I had Ancho Reyes, I was a bartender for about 20 years in New York. My mind was blown because it tasted. I mean, one, the complexity was there. It was super delicious, and there was a good amount of heat. It wasn't overpowering. It was just very, very well balanced. And then when I saw this corn liqueur coming out, I was very like, I don't know what this is going to taste like. This is going to be weird. But I mean, not that you're right here, but it's super delicious. I've had it in cold brew coffee. I've had it in an old fashioned before. And it's really, really good. So what was your thoughts on making these products? What went into making these things? I mean, because obviously they're very well received with bartenders. And to your point, there was a lot of liqueurs that were just flavored whatever. That me coming up as a bartender, we use all kind of liqueurs that were just flavored nonsense until products like yours came along, and we were like, oh, this tastes like real chilies. This tastes like corn. This tastes super, super delicious. So what were your ideas around creating these products? And then how did you go about getting, resources and doing everything that you've been doing with these products?
Well, I think, I'm very, in terms of the inspiration, I have the enormous luck of coming from Mexico, and Mexico since, I mean, it's one of the center of biodiversity bigger in the world. I mean, we are the seventh most diverse country in the world. We have high mountains to beach. I mean, and many kilometers of them. But it's not only about what biodiversity we had been holding since millions of years, but a lot of what came to us in the first really globalization timing that was when the Americas were discovered, and where Europe was also conquering Africa and connecting with Asia, creating all these routes. Mexico happened to be just in the middle, and the Spanish Empire identified that it was easier to move goods from Asia into Mexico than moving those goods within their own empire in Mexico and then shipping them from Mexico to Spain than trying to go by land on the other side of the world. And that created that enormous amount of plants and came from Asia into Mexico, like, for example, sugarcane, the palm tree that we also do. I mean, not commercially, but you can find fermented palm wine in Mexico. Would be really nice to make a spirit out of that, right? But we have that. We have the sugarcane, and we also exported our goods. The chilies went all around the world. I mean, who could imagine Southeast Asia without chilies? But those were originated in Mexico. We exchanged that. So right now, Mexico has things like tamarind that came also from Asia, really well established citrus trees. Like, I mean, you go to Yucatan, it's probably the most indigenous areas in the country right now, the Yucatan Peninsula, where still 70% of people speak Maya and Spanish. So they are really a bilingual culture. And their food that, yes, is still very pre-Hispanic, but has been absolutely influenced by citrus, for example. So I can tell you multiple examples. I don't want to get there, but what I'm just saying, in Mexico, and as you move from one region to another, it just offers you so much in terms of the different plants that are being farmed, and also those that are wild. I mean, we just recently, last week, launched a new gin that is made with wild herbs from Baja and Alta California. I don't want to focus too much on that in this talk, but what I'm just saying is so much to look at. And we understood, Moy, Danny, and myself, when we were developing Montelobos, and then when we start to work in Ancho, that we had to change the mission of what we were doing into a more broader, ample perspective, and was how to bring the sensorial, cultural, and biological diversity of Mexico into the world in the business we are, that is spirits. And when that idea came into our minds and we digested it and we start to say, well, we could be serial entrepreneurs. There's enough stuff here to bring things with true proposition that are authentic. That's what we started to investigate things. So let's say agave took me to reflect in the many other raw materials that we have, and we haven't finished. Just want to say, I mean, yes, you have seen from us the agave, you have seen from us the chilies, you have seen from us the corn. Now you, as last week presented, 5 years project in researching herbs and botanicals from the arid regions at the tip of Baja in Cabos to the border of the north of California and Oregon, integrating wild botanicals into a gin with a juniper that is Juniper californicus, endangered, that we have an entire program to multiply, reproduce this plant and plant it and increase the number of these trees right now through an environmental entity called Unidad de Manejo Ambiental, UMAS, in Mexico. But we are opening to new ideas as well, not only to farming, but also to the possibility of managing in a responsible way and bringing resources to keep alive species and herbs that are of great sensorial interest, but that nobody is looking at them, and they are just disappearing. Why to make a gin with Juniper communis, which is an European plant, buying in the open market the berries, or sometimes growing them I mean, I just know about one case in the US that are growing juniper communis. When you have a multitude of species of juniper growing around, go for the one. So in this case, Ginlas California as well is using Juniper Californicus. So that's kind of the thing. So, and we found something that is working, a model, let's say, a formula in which we identify a beautiful raw material. We explore if that is something will be relevant for the bartender or for the consumer. If we identify that, we try to put together a farming project that will try to be as clean as possible, as tasty as possible, that will keep the ancestral knowledge in farming those type of raw materials, and then how we could process that in the most authentic way in order to bring a flavor that can truly represent what Mexico and that raw material potential is. And that's what we do now. Most of the time. We are also starting to do other crazy stuff. Like, for example, we just launched an Irish whiskey. I know it's weird, but that's because also being entrepreneurs and getting fascination for that subject, seeing others entrepreneurs, now we want to join them. And you will be seeing new stuff and more stuff from Casa Lumbre, not from fully, let's say, inspired brands, but also allowing other geographies. I mean, Latin America is opening for us right now. I mean, I have enormous interest for Central America, for, well, the in Mexico, the Mayan area, Colombia. I mean, there's a lot of things to look at right now, but we are still more known, and that's great because there's a lot coming from Mexico. That is what I was telling you, is this quest of doing that. And by doing that, we started 3 people, Danny, Moy, myself, and Betty. Right now, we are 320 people in Casa Lumbre. We have an office in New York, and in the US, a team of around 50 people, and the others are in production. It's 11 years of hard work trying to bring things from the best place we can from to the market, no?
Yeah, well, you've definitely been doing it in a very unique way. I mean, most people just come out with their tequila and then they make a mezcal and they kind of call it a day. You guys just seem to, every few years, here's something new, but not just something new, something completely different. Like I said, when Ancho Reyes came out and then the corn liqueur came out, and then all of a sudden there's a Mexican whiskey, and I was like, oh, this is fun and this is creative. Do you think, I mean, obviously you've been doing that for 11 years. Do you think the American palate, the American consumer, I mean, because for me, when I went to college, it was stay away from tequila, right? It was don't touch that stuff.
Course.
That's the hangover. That's terrible stuff. Don't even drink it. We drank other crap like Goldschlager or whatever, but we didn't drink the tequila. Obviously, when we start to, fast forward,
Full accident. I have
so
long
excited.
legs. I'm sorry. But
No
you
worries.
hear me right? Fine?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
I can hear you. A little bit of that sunlight still in your face. There you turn it a little to your right, I think. There you go. Perfect. So yeah, I mean, I'm wondering do you see it? Do you think the American consumer has started to realize the complexity of these Mexican spirits, of tequila, of mezcal, of the things that you're making? Has the tide changed a little bit on the thought process of what consumers think of Mexican spirits?
Look, I truly believe that the influence and the cross-cultural relationships between Mexico and the US, I mean, has always been there, but now with the internet, now with the culinary explosion that Mexican cuisine is having in the US, with the demographics, the US and Mexico has never been as close as right now. I mean, just 10 years ago to now, I mean, things are changing enormously. I was reading just yesterday morning, I think was in the Shaken News or something, that for the first time in the history of the spirits industry in the US, there were more agave-based spirits adding tequila and mezcal together, consuming the US than whiskey, any kind of whiskey. So now is the largest category, agave, in the United States. So that tells you a lot. If that consumption is at what level nerd or at what level conscious about the multi-layer components that a spirit coming from agave comes, I'm not sure. But it's not fine. I think that has been growing as well. But it's also true that you have more Middle America deciding not to make shots of vodka or just drink bourbon, and now are drinking tequila. I mean, you have celebrity brands as well who has been helping to attract attention, and of course that put a lot of pressure in how we as producers are gonna be faithful to our brands and careful to the land in terms of the farming. But I think that, yeah, inevitably Mexico is a brand as a country, and tequila and agave spirits are products that are growing in the mind of the American consumer enormously. Some in a more culturated way, more sophisticated way. Others maybe not so much. But if you look at 100% tequila, which has been what has been growing the most, at least I can tell you we are in a much better place than 20 years ago. I mean, honestly, the proportion of 100% tequila versus mixto is a great difference. And mezcal becoming 100% agave a few years ago, and expanding in the presence of different brands, different prices. Complex is a very complex category. I wouldn't say it's easy to understand mezcal. I think it's also bringing great stuff to the industry. I think it's a much more refined spirit than a vodka in terms of how it's been made. And in that sense, I think that tells a lot of good stuff about the palate of the consumers. That there's a big interest in flavor again, in making your life richer. And look, flavor is apparently an abstract thing, but it's very real. I mean, flavor, which is perception built by whatever is in your neurological history, because you process an experience based on the networks of neurons you have created. I mean, a little bit like I don't know, you know, this book, In the Search of the Lost Time. There's a famous book in which the author is describing that he's trying a Madeleine in Paris, and in France they are in the outside of Paris. And when he tasted, he just come back to his childhood. So flavor is something very complex, but very, very real, and it's part of our culture. And I think seeing tequila, seeing mezcal becoming relevant for the American palate, and for the Mexicans and Latin Americans that lives in the US as well, or that arrive into there, is great. Is developing a society who wants to experience more from the perspective of what they are eating. I also see that the big boom of the industrialization of hamburgers, for example, in the US. Now you have so many options of the hamburger that I love, by the way, is delicious, that are more refined, that are using local tomatoes. And that trend in general, I think, is helping agave and Mexican spirits to be valued in the US.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the analogy with the burgers. Yeah, I could crush a burger pretty much every night. Yeah, when we started Arte Agave, the event about 10 years ago, and one of the reasons I started, because I was a bartender and a lot of people were starting to ask questions about tequila and a reposado and a añejo. They didn't even no clue what that even was. But our year one and even two, we were like begging people to come to our event, and they just weren't really into it. There were some people that were into it, but it wasn't like it is now. And now, like you had mentioned, there's so many brands and celebrity brands, and people are hungry to learn more, and they're hungry to taste. And I think that's great. I think we've seen it with, like, you know, the craft beer movement in like the 80s, that people want, like you said, flavor. They want complexity, you know, and I'm not going to diss vodka, but it's like, you know, you're just kind of tasting some neutral grain spirit, and you can add some stuff to it too, but it's fun. But it's like, you know, people want that flavor, and they want that complexity. And I think, you know, mezcal and tequila have come a long way in the American consumer's mind, and they've helped kind of grow this category. And now that you're coming in with all these other fun spirits and the gin and the corn and the whiskey, you're just adding to it. And I think, you know, the American palate is not going to rest, and they're going to keep looking for that next gourmet burger. You know, they want that fresh lettuce, they want that tomato, they want that sauce, whatever it's going to be. And I think it's an exciting time. It's very cool that you're leading the way in doing this, and you know, not just
another thing that is happening as another kind of cultural trend, not only the flavor, that is allowing this kind of expressions to be interesting and people looking at them, is that, I mean, when I was very young, like starting to drink, or even maybe breaking the law a little bit, just
how young was that?
Really, really young. The coolest thing you could drink was an Absolute vodka, let's say, because Absolute, just for saying something, but you were drinking something with, I don't know, orange juice with vodka. You were feeling part of the world. The entire mindset was how to be global, how to be part of something that everybody is being part of. And the way to do it was to homogenize. I mean, everybody was looking to wear the same shoes, the same Jordan shoes I was looking for when I was playing basketball. Everybody wanted to drink that Absolute brand. And what happened with the alcohol industry, the late 60s to the late or the early 90s, was that all the 10 or 15 biggest brands in the world were selling 80% of the alcohol in the world. I mean, was a hyper concentration. Actually, the business model of the large companies like Diageo, Pernod, are still today, they are struggling because they are still based on how they make global campaigns about products that at the time emotionally were really fascinating. The possibility of everybody drinking a Swedish spirit, for just because I'm taking that example. And that used to connect with the individual. Now, the way we use brands and we connect with products is totally different. We don't want to drink what everybody's drinking. That is not cool anymore. You don't want to belong that way. Belonging means being different to everybody else. It's a weird way that at the end is being the same that everybody, because not wanting to belong in order to belong, or let's say not wanting to standardize yourself in order to be part of some urban I don't know, tribe or tendency. It's also in a way a very followed behavior. But going away around that, medium brands are gonna start to pop up much more, and you start to see that the market share will start to be not so much owned by very just the few largest 10, 20 brands, but suddenly you have new propositions that have been appearing there that are bringing emotional and sensorial experiences to the consumer. And then it's also not the small brands, but the tiny little ones, and whatever. Any small brand has to be tiny first. I mean, and that's one of the questions I like, or that sometimes I make, but a subject I like to touch always is, so what is Casa Lumbre endeavor? Is you want to make tiny craft brands? And my answer is not really. I like to think I can truly make a difference in a community by enlarging the amount of chili fields that there are being established, or that I can get the Calimaya Valley where we grow the cacahuacintle, and if I'm growing today 10, well, I want to grow 100 later in the most sustainable possible way, and permitting some impact in the community. Because, honestly, what I think we are trying to do is to create small to medium. Medium can be a very broad space in numbers of cases, but to bring a proposition that is available in the world, which means you can be in London, you can be in New York, you can be in Istanbul, you can be in Melbourne, and you can find a bottle of Montelobos, for example. But at the same time, my interest is not to be the biggest. My interest is not to own the category. My interest is to be something very clearly defined, an experience that is different from others, an offer that is unique, that has certain reasons to believe, and that the consumer feels connected with it through flavor, through emotion, through nerdiness or intellectuality, because there's some elements on that as well. And I want the world to drink better with my brands. I think there's a space for many others, and we are good friends. I mean, I personally, I'm a big cheerleader for all the entrepreneurs who are bringing their mezcals, their tequilas, and their many other products and propositions from Mexico or elsewhere, because I think that's what the world requires. And because this size of operations allows a much interesting impact socially and in terms of agriculture as well, than the immense production plants that will make millions and millions of cases, that will buy in international markets commodities like wheat or grains, or you know what I mean. So how can we change the entire chain to create more abundant options, make life interesting, richer in flavor, but richer in options too? And I think never in life we as entrepreneurs had so much opportunity.
Yeah, so we talk about the plants and agriculture, and all I've been hearing since I started doing events 10 years ago is the agaves and the agave shortage and the agave problems. What does the future of the agave plant look like? I mean, I feel like there's a new tequila brand every day. So what will there be a problem with agaves in Mexico in the future? Is there a problem now?
There's multiple ways of looking at the issue, and also it's important. I mean, tequila has its own problem. Let's say the problematics of tequila, which are also right now is in a circumstance where success doesn't seem to stop, and doesn't matter how much blue agave is planted, is never enough. But that's a particular thing. But yeah, I think, first of all, agave plants are the most water use efficient plants in the world. I mean, if you have a liter of water, if you want to trap CO2 in order to make sugar or make something that has energy, because that's what sugar is the sunlight transforming to a link that connects one carbon to another. And when you do that 6 times, you make a sugar. I mean, I'm oversimplifying. And then that sugar can be burned by you, that you have your own oven or biochemical system to break that energy and put it inside you, or you can transform it into alcohol and burn it or whatever. Or if you bury it underground for millions of years, you make oil, but at the end, everything was sugar, even the gas in your car. If you look at that, agave uses, in the most effective way, water. So deserts are growing in the world. I have a very weird position on agave spirits and on agave agriculture, different from many of my colleagues. I think agave was already dispersed in 500 years ago in the world, when the grapes were arriving into Argentina and Mexico and Napa Valley, where there were no grapes. Agaves were going to South Africa and to Australia and to the Mediterranean. And there's nothing wrong that the rest of the world make the most extraordinary spirits out of the agaves that are growing there since 500 years ago. The fact that they don't have the crop, that's true. The fact that they have to learn if they want to use that raw material, but please use your raw material. I mean, Australia has large programs for biofuels based on agave right now.
Yeah.
So in terms of conditions, the world needs more plantations of agave for sure, of multiple species. Then let's go about the reality. I think we should not stay with blue agave or espadín only. I mean, Montelobos launched the first brand be fully cultivated of Tovala, and we also have an ensemble that uses mostly Cupriata, 100% coming from grown plants. It's more complex because you have to grow from seeds. There's no hijuelos. There's no these offsprings to cut. So, but that has to be done. We are now, and I mean, I'm not going to talk much about what brand and what's going on. That's going to happen eventually. But we have an agricultural company called Mezcales Artesanales Casa Lumbre that is investing and growing multiple species of agave and growing these things. And recently, we've been working with a group of people in Chihuahua to also start the domestication of the Silurian or the desert spoon, which so far nobody has put enough attention to. And yeah, the brands are amazing and the Sotol is great. How are we gonna grow a lot of that without having to either walk kilometers and kilometers and kilometers, or again, make a ecological crisis by extracting from nature? So in other words, there's a lot of challenges, but there's a lot of opportunities. Not only, I mean, the only thing is the companies creating brands, the companies selling products, they have to understand, they have to be involved in the entire chain. Nowadays, I mean, there was time when my very admired and good friend Ron Cooper started with a model that I think is beautiful, that is Del Maguey with the single village mezcal that was amazing.
Yep.
That model had its sense at the time, but when you suddenly have a product in your portfolio, or there's a brand who is super successful, you either get involved in how you're gonna grow that agave in the best way, or you're gonna get in trouble. You cannot just leave to supply chain or your friends in the communities, or just in that case, or in any other, because there's many brands who are also making wild agave mezcal. You really need to think for environmental reasons, but also for business reasons.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to offer an SKU, a product that is delicious and great, well, then maybe it's a good idea to think how you can grow this. So my feeling, I mean, it's a little bit different in tequila and everything else from agave. I can go for tequila in a moment, but is that there's great news, great trends to truly, as entrepreneurs, as businessmen, invest in the most healthy, well executed, less environmentally impactful strategy of bringing plantations that has the largest diversity possible into the fields, and that brings the best quality, correctly ripe, correctly managed plantations into the fields, in order to bring wonderful tequila and wonderful mezcal, because raw material does makes a difference.
Yeah.
Even though the flavoring houses are there to help those that are ready to push a little bit their flavors, but that's not really, I mean, that's not really the way. The way is to have the best possible raw material in the sufficient quantities you have. And you are using a cultivation that does not require watering, that can tolerate the terrible heat waves that we are suffering around the world right now. So, and Mexico and other countries, again, inviting the world to fall in love with agave and do their own projects, is full of semi-arid and arid environments to create spirits out of agave. So I think it's a great, more potential than challenge, but both has to be addressed in a conscious, coherent way.
Yeah. So how can consumers learn about these products? I mean, I feel like, I worked with bourbon for a while, and there always seemed to be these set rules of bourbon, made in America, it's got to have, new oak barrel, et cetera, et cetera. When people talk about tequila, mezcal, or tequila in particular, it doesn't seem to be set rules. You can add things or do whatever you kind of want. How does a consumer try to get through all the noise of what brand is doing what? Is there any place to look, and how do people identify what brands are doing?
Look, it's difficult because, I mean, there's this obsession, and the Americans has a little bit of that, which I don't think is bad. I think it's very good. I mean, but it's an obsession. It's which is, who's the bad guy, who's the good guy, and sometimes it's this really round, like they want these short answers, because you are either completely good or completely bad, And
that's very true.
And in a way, it's true. Honest, you're honest or dishonest. In a way, it's actually true. But it's also true that not all brands can be made the same. I mean, there's a space for a mix of tequila. I think so in the world. It is. I think there's a place for something that is super crafted, that is fermented and with fiber and distilled with fiber. Where there's no even steam involved, but you have these ancestral techniques. There's a space for a lot of things that are good quality. But if you tell me, I think first you have to like the product, taste of it, and second you have to try to learn the relationship to the place of origin, very important. Second, you would like to learn how where the flavors come from and how they appear there, and I mean, if you are a nerd, but there's not gonna be, I mean, I know we have the Consejo Regulador del Mezcal and the CRT of tequila. Those councils help somehow, but look, if you want to break the rules, you will. I mean, at the end, it's about the ethics of each producer and the interest of the consumer of choosing what they want to do. There's people, for example, that rejects in mezcal anything that is medium size, because still any mezcal brand, even the largest, is nothing compared to the medium sized tequila brands that are out there. I mean, mezcal is 3-4% of what the 100% tequila is as an entire industry. I mean, see, 3 years ago, Patron was making more tequila than the entire mezcal industry altogether. Just to try to understand what is big and what is not big. Right. And then in this obsession of trying to characterize the goods and the bads and the best and the worst, sometimes we can get very purist, which I think is not bad. I'm purist in a way, but I also understand that in order to serve a glass of tequila in the world, you will need to have different approaches and different perspective and different price bands and different taste profiles. So I don't think that there's the bads and the goods. I think there's different kind of levels of craft. There's different kind of levels. But what I think is that whoever is doing this should care about the environment, should care about be ethical and transparent. So like the disclosing what is actually occurring. And that's something that whoever is not doing right now will be losing the chance to attract a discerning drinker, because discerning drinkers are asking and discerning drinkers wants to know. But if I would be as a consumer, I would say where your product is coming from, who is making it, what's the reputation of the company doing it in terms of transparency, openness, and do you like the product or you don't? That will be then after those easy questions are answered, you want to get deeper, go deeper, man. I mean, I love nerdiness. I love to tell and explain these very complicated stories about the chemistry of the flavors of the plants, but the core thing is you first should care about what you put in your body, and you should care about the experience you choose. I don't know, it's like getting into Disneyland knowing you will go for one day. You have to choose which is the thing you want to see and which cues you're going to be making, man, because life is short, and the time in Disneyland is for just a certain number of hours, and you cannot see it all. So choose well what you want to drink and why, and make yourself happy. Respect what you consider what is important, and hopefully environment, flavor, and will be part of and quality will be part of your experience, what you want to have.
It's great. I love your analogies, and I love that you're like, the Americans we're always looking for the bad guy. I mean,
maximizing outcome, man.
I mean, it's even worse. I mean, just over the last few years, we're just always looking for the bad guy. We're always looking for something wrong. Ivan, I love your insight on everything. Do you ever think about running for political office anywhere?
No, never in my life.
But this is why we need a guy like you, because you don't want to do it. We need a person like you, the person that says, no, I don't want anything to do with it. That is exactly who we need. We need more people like you. We need leaders, people who care about us and the environment, not just political people that want to just be into politics.
Look, something is talking about my role in different dimensions. Once, of course, I have always loved to be an educator, particularly in agave, but now this is widening a little bit up. Also, there's going to be this event next week called Barra Mexico that I feel really proud because it's happening in Mexico, and it's conglomerating brand makers and bartenders, something that is growing more in Mexico. And I will be giving a talk, for example, on how to bring a new product to life. So I feel that my role, a little bit more than any political thing, is to share more of what we have learned and make others and invite others to also do it. Because I think the sun comes out for everybody, and that we are in a time in which a lot of these clever minds in bringing better offers, innovative, cool, are really good. So that is to the outside. Inside my company, there's so many cool ideas, some that are not coming from me anymore, some that are covering profiles that are sometimes not my number one thing. I mean, If you have the chance to do the mezcal you like to do the most, like I did with Montelobo, that was great. And then I've been being part of bringing, for example, Ojo de Tigre to life, which I love as well, but was my second boy in making mezcal. I was already very invested in the thing that I like it as it tastes the best in my flavor. But now my role is not about me doing whatever I want as a master distiller, because I just find this corn whiskey, like Abasolo, is a lot about how I like it, Abasolo, to taste. I still have some discussions in here in the office with Danny and Moy, where, hey man, I think this should have a little bit of more wood, and I'm fighting back and saying, no, I didn't want the more wood. And look, we could have had it, but I didn't want it. So sometimes I have the chance to be this prick who just do that product that is coming from his soul, and but there's other projects that are collaborative, that are about enhancing and allowing other perspective of flavor and other perspective of what a spirit could be, like the Lost Irish with Tim, or partner. I don't know if you know him. He was for a long time ambassador of Tullamotu. He came out. He really knows about Irish whiskey, and I collaborated with him. But really, the product is his idea, his baby. We partnered with him, and now, strangely, Casa Lumbre has an Irish whiskey that we feel very proud to have. But we are now in a moment as entrepreneurs, as a spirit in the evolution of our business, that we can be there to allow other expressions to occur. Other things that we are doing, and many people doesn't know, is we have a company that helps retailers and helps like the Total Wines, the Specs in the world, like they want more diversity of things, and we develop and bring to the US products they wish to do. I'm not so much involved on that, but within my department, we develop things, and those are products that are there. So we are doing it with honesty, we are doing it with transparency, we're doing it in the best possible way, you know. But yeah, we are not only dedicated to let's say, to the, not anymore only to the super craft that Iván Desire wants to do, but some brands are. So that's why in some brands I'm clearly a master distiller. So the guy who is choosing, and I can give you all the explanation, like Montelobos, with Ancho Reyes, I played that role, Nixta, Abasolo, now the new gin that just came out that I hope soon you will taste it, that is amazing.
Definitely.
Those are projects I invest between 2 years to 6 years to develop. It's a really long process of development, putting together the farming, building distillery sometimes, studying processes, choosing what particular variety of corn or whatever you're going to use, they take that long. And a lot is about what is my vision of flavor and final product. But we have other things news, like, I mean, I think in Ojo de Tigre, we have the best mezcal to invite new consumers to discover the category, with a blend of Tobala and Espadín. That's amazing. That's something that was not done for me to drink, maybe, but that doesn't mean it's worse, or it's better for hundreds of people and millions of people. So now it's not only my ego-centered desire of bringing a product to others, but I have the Chief Innovation Officer seat in Casa Lumbre. We are a 300 and almost 350 people company where there's lots of talent, lots of great ideas, and my job is to support meaningful innovation that can truly bring wonderful experience and brands out to the world. Medium size. I mean, we are not so much into being, let's put millions to be the kings of, no, that's not our things. But yeah, brings things out. And in that sense, I love how my role is changing from spending a lot of time in these projects to support other people's ideas, to educate, to allow magic to occur within teams. And for me, as a professional, I mean, it's the best that could have happened in my career, the moment I am right now.
That's awesome, and congratulations on everything, going from 3 people to 300 people. Before I let you leave, what are you drinking these days? I'm sure you're drinking your products. What are you drinking, and how are you drinking it?
So I've been drinking a lot of, I have to say, of Sotol lately.
Cool.
And well, I'm drinking. I almost drink everything neat.
Yep.
I'm drinking beer and wine because I mean natural wine. I'm absolutely crazy right now. I mean, I think the thing I drink the most right now is natural wine, and Mexico
Okay.
is doing really great,
Yeah.
really great natural wines in Baja. I like beer as well, and then I've been very fascinated with Sotol lately. If I'm gonna choose something neat, that's what I'm drinking. And of course, I drink everything else. Whiskey. We are developing new things right now in Abasolo. That's going to be super exciting soon. But you're asking me, what do you do on a Saturday afternoon when you are relaxing and you are that? That is what I am drinking.
Cool.
I already drink a lot of hard alcohol every day because I have to do quality testing.
You have to, right? You have to.
So
Yeah.
my weekends are about the not so hard alcohol. Really, I prefer a glass of wine.
I don't blame you. That's awesome. Well, listen, again, congratulations on your success. And we appreciate you, Casa Lumbre Brands. I've always been part of the Arte Agave experiences. So thank you for that support. And we look forward to having your brands at all of our festivals again this year. So we appreciate it. So cool, man. Thank you for your time. And
No,
again,
thank you.
Congrats on everything. Just before we wrap up, where can people just casalombre.com? Is that basically where everybody can find
That's
the
right.
brands?
Casalumbre.com is our company webpage. You will find, I think, Las California's gin hasn't been added to
Gotcha.
our different products. You will find there our brands if you want to look at them. But thank you so much for the invitation. I enjoy it enormously.
Awesome. We appreciate you, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Wonderful.
All
Thank
right.
you.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.